We're testing the mic. Can you hear me?
We good?
Very good.
Okay. State your name, please.
Michael Unger. What else?
And I'm Carlisle Floyd.
That's right.
Did the political climate and McCarthyism figure into the conception of the piece at all?
Indirectly, because I lived through it, the McCarthy period, along with everybody else of my age. And it's certainly one of the darkest periods of my life. Right. Because it was a real kind of atmosphere of suspicion, accusation without evidence. All these kind of things are very much part of the period. And I was at Florida State at the time, and I was a very young professor. And I was aware of the fact that there was a kind of a witch hunt going on for two things: communists and homosexuals. The Johns Committee, which was a notorious committee for rooting out communists in universities and homosexuals in universities. So it was a very, very a period of accusation, a false accusation, accusation without guilt, and the whole idea of accusation being tantamount to guilt, which is one of the things we deal with directly in Susannah. So I think nobody could have lived through this period and not been affected by it. We were forced, as a matter of fact, on pain of losing our jobs, if we would not sign a statement saying that we were not communists and had never been. Wow. Otherwise, your job was at stake. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty strong. I mean, that's a pretty difficult thing to combat. Of course, it was easy for us to, because none of us ever thought about being communists. But nonetheless, it was the idea of it, just having somebody's foot on your neck. Right. It was not happy. So, and also in my own area, I had students who were falsely accused of being homosexual and were brought before the dean of the university, and didn't know what they were even talking about. But I saw the devastation it wrought on these people who were brought in like that. Yeah. So all of this was part of the background for Susannah. The whole idea of the destruction of innocence, which comes through that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's a period that we've never had before. I mean, since, certainly not to the same extent, and I hope we never do. I would like to think that we've grown beyond that. But the so-called House Un-American Affairs Committee was a very powerful committee, and they made it their business to root out suspected communists in Washington. And Florida simply took it the direction they wanted to take it. But the impetus for it was the same. Right. And that really just angered me, but it angered everybody, I think, of my generation. As I said, it's in a free society, it seems against that society that has the foot on your neck.
You took the apocryphal tale, Susannah and the Elders, and obviously extrapolated and added your own, version of the characters. Is there anything else you can just shed light for us on the impetus and the inspiration for the piece?
I thought it was a wonderful story. I mean, as I envisioned it, a friend of mine just simply, who was an English major and was a would-be writer and wanted to do the libretto, as a matter of fact. The libretto being, as you all know, the text of the piece. But he suggested to me, he says, have you ever thought of updating the story of Susannah and the Elders and the Apocrypha? And I had heard about Susannah and the Elders, about like most of you, and I knew it had been a subject for Renaissance paintings and this kind of thing, but I was not sure exactly what it was. I knew that it was the conviction of an innocent woman of having, so-called in Old Testament terms, lain with two elders. In other words, had sexual relations with two elders, and they simply said to her, if you don't submit to us, we will convict you anyway. We will say that you have. And she was headed for conviction when the Old Testament prophet, I forget, Daniel, came on the scene and put the two elders into separate rooms and interrogated them, one and then the next one. And the question was that they asked was, under what kind of a tree did this incident occur? And one said an oak tree and one said a plane tree. And of course, the fact that they both gave separate answers to this question, they were then, I think in good Old Testament terms, hung by their thumbs or something. Very brutal. And also Susannah was exonerated, which she's not in mine.
There's a lot of folk tune, there's a lot of Protestant hymn kind of melodies that come out. So were those just from your knowledge of it as a child, or did you research sort of?
No.
No. You just,
No.
It's in you, you knew it.
No, it's that's one aspect of the musical score, but it's actually, when you look at the entire score, it's a slight one. A lot of it is just music.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That doesn't have any kind of folk-like references at all. But I wanted it, if it was going to be used, I wanted it to sound quite as legitimate as I know it to be.
Yeah, right.
And that came very simply from me.
Yeah.
I assumed that I heard things like this when I was growing up, but I don't know that I did.
Right.
But the folk music in Susannah is not there to pick out folk songs. It's there to give you a sense of flavor where you are, and you do that right off the bat. In the opening music, we play the folk song in the orchestra. The folk song is so-called is all mine, text and music, but it's there for a reason, because the basic underlying theme of Susannah from beginning to end is the whole tragedy of betrayal. And the folk song is all about a young woman whose lover has left her and left her with a child. You hear it in the orchestra first, and then again you hear it at the end of the first act when Little Bat betrays Susannah. And then you hear it completely sung, because in that scene at the end of the first act, it's not sung. There's no voice at all. It's all in the orchestra. But in the after the revival meeting scene, you hear it in its completion with Susannah singing it after Blitz's betrayal of her in the revival meeting scene.
One thing that you don't know as an audience member is the rich and wonderful dialect that Carlisle has written into the score. But the dialect is written, actually you'll see the surtitles, and we've kept the surtitles exactly as Carlisle wrote it in the score, where you see, we don't sing for, we sing fer, F-E-R. We sing a lot, not many INGs, a lot of IN apostrophes. So can you talk about how you use the libretto to communicate to the performers exactly, the style, the feeling, the location?
And I tried to write it as phonetically correct as possible, so that it's all written into the text. Certainly my model for this was Tennessee Williams, who does a terrific job of this, writing out Southern dialect in all of his plays.
Yes.
Mine is not the same kind of Southern dialect as his. Mine is hill country.
Right.
But I grew up with these people, and I heard their speech growing up, and it's not a pretty dialect by any means, but it's nonetheless, it's theirs.
Yeah. If you don't know the opera, when you see it, the sophistication of libretto and orchestration and musical composition, I mean, not many people do this all by themselves. So can you talk about your collaborators, meaning yourself?
Yeah.
And working with yourself?
That's right, yeah. Many people over the years have asked me would I work with a librettist, and I say, no, I don't think so. I mean, I would be too cranky. I mean, it's taken me too long to learn what goes into good libretto writing. Yeah. I think I would feel that I had to end up teaching them, myself, because I've taught libretto writing to composers. Yeah. So for better or worse, I'm still doing my own librettos.
Mm-hmm. But I think for better, for sure. I mean, I've done 2 Floyd operas. I did of Mice and Men, and this one, and the economy of dialogue is so spectacular and so clean, and there's not one wasted syllable nor a wasted note. And one of the fun things I've been having so much fun with is Carlisle stages the opera just with the music, because there's all this wonderful dialogue, and then there's a section of music where there's no dialogue. So I got to figure out what Carlisle meant, but someone's got to cross somewhere, move somewhere, and we have this wonderful height in our set with a ladder that goes up to an attic, and there's definitely climbing down the ladder music that I needed at just the time for her to climb down the ladder. So I thank you for all that staging help, because it really helps the director figure out what's in your mind, because they're not singing the whole way through. There's some pauses, there's some interludes that have to be filled, and it's been really fun to figure out, you know, how to make sense of it. For me, I hope you agree with the sense I made. So your father was a Methodist minister, right?
Yes.
So can you talk to us, I mean, obviously religion plays a very large part in this opera. Can you talk to us about your relationship with religion vis-a-vis the opera?
My father was not an evangelist. He was a Methodist minister, and he did revival meetings in the summer, but he was not an evangelist type of minister. So that there were 5 revival meetings, which my sister and I, being taken to all of them, didn't think that was very appealing. But we stuck it out anyway and ate ourselves foolish, because all the ladies in the community always had the visiting minister and the minister and his family in for dinner. And each one tried to outdo what the other one had done. So it was a period of putting on pounds, even for children. But that's all part of my background, and that's what that struck me as always being very colorful, but also very, very disturbing. Because as a child, hearing all of these things and pondering what the term being saved meant, it was very disturbing, not only for me, but anybody I've talked to since who grew up with this generation. Right. And that's what I wanted to do in the revival meeting scene. It's by no means a satire. It's very serious, and it's not to be done to poke fun at it. It's very literal.
Yeah. It's a brutally honest piece. I mean,
absolutely. And you either, if this is the kind of religiosity that appeals to you and that you feel committed to, fine. I personally found it also very terrifying as a child to go to these meetings. And I think most people I've talked to who were brought up with this in their background felt the same way. But the thing that I really was offended by most about them as a child, without really being able to verbalize it, was simply the mass coercion. I felt like the entire congregation was on my back, you know, to go to the altar or whatever. And I resented the fact of the mob or the group against the individual, which is what I felt and sensed in the revival meetings, and which we'll actually see, as I haven't seen what you've done with it. You'll see the same sort of thing in this revival meeting, of individuals being lured or pressed to go to the altar, pressed to make a confession. You have no way of knowing what their inner life is, but you just make the assumption that they need this. Yeah. And that's what offended me most, was mass coercion, and it still does.
You were talking a few minutes ago about the terror that you found when you were watching, you know, or hearing about, you know, being saved or going to hell. And we have 10 kids in the show, and Todd Donovan, who plays Blitch, his 2 daughters are in the show, and this raised some wonderful questions with them from the revival scene about what does it mean, Dad, to be saved or to be a sinner, you know. So this has been a great learning. I think, Todd, you'll concur that this was a great learning experience for your kids, just going through this process and learning from this piece about what all that means, you know. You wrote this when you were how old?
I started on it when I was about 26, 27, I would say.
Okay.
I finished it when I was 28, I think it was. Right. I once said in a New York Times interview that I never wanted, one of my real aims as a composer, librettist, it was that I didn't want the audience to blink. Because I think frequently people think, go to the opera and have a nice nap, you know. And when you wake up, they're still at the same place, you know. And I think there's merit in that accusation, but I never wanted to be accused of that. And so if you blink, I hope you do miss something, and I expect that you would. But I had a very nice thing happen to me. My opera Willie Stark, which was having its premiere at the Kennedy Center, on opening night, the then head of the Arts Committee for the Senate, or Congressman Yates, he was a congressman, sorry, from Illinois. He was head of the Cultural Affairs for the Senate, and he was sitting next to me in the box, and I was introduced to him before the curtain, and then at the end of it, he said, "Mr. Floyd," he said, "I've had a very bad day. I've flown to Chicago and back today." And I thought, well, good, I'll have a chance to catch up at the opera tonight. He said, "And I have to tell you, I never dozed once." And I said, "That's the finest compliment you could possibly pay me. And I hope you don't doze at all tomorrow night. If so, I want to know about it."
All right. So don't blink. Enjoy the opera. Thank you, Carlisle Floyd.
Thank you.
He winked at me and I winked at him. I picked up a brickbat, hit him on the chin. Look at here, little boy, don't you do that again.